Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the midday keynote for the 2013 School Leadership Summit. We're almost halfway through the day. This has really been fun. We're really delighted that you're here to listen to Yong Zhao. Yong, welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks so much for being a part of our day. Thanks to the School Leadership Summit sponsors and supporters, this day would not have happened without the support of TCAL. They've been terrific partners in helping to make this happen. So thanks to TCAL, thanks to Wilson Consulting, the Asia Society, and Intel. And some special appreciation for our keynote sessions to the Asia Society for advice, consulting, and the like. This is your chance to tell us where you're participating from. Look to the left of the map now. You should see some icons. You're looking for the star icon. It's the second one down. Double click on it and click on the map. It's fun to have you tell us in the chat the time, the temperature, and the like. I'm in Australia, between Sydney and Melbourne, and waiting for the day to actually warm up. Where are you? Tell us. Fun to see all of you. Thank you so much for being here. If you're listening to the recording, thanks for taking the time. I'm going to turn it over to you now, Yong.
All right. Well, great. Thank you. It's good to see so many people. We see people from China, from New Zealand, and Canada, and the U.S. It's great. So this is, I'm happy to see that it's from the large number of participants in the online conference I've ever seen. It's over 100, and so it's great. So what I would like to really talk about today is think about the definition of world-class education, because everybody wants a perfect education for their children, and children in different countries. And we have been driven a lot recently by test scores, especially international test scores, to define the quality of our education system. You know, the PISA is become one of them, and I know many countries have great aspirations to be the top scoring countries. Like Australia recently wants to become top. I think enter the top 5 league, and other studies like TIMSS has been driving a lot of education reform agendas as well. But are there really good measures, or what are we talking about as good education? So for all of you, if you come to think about it, why do we even give education? What's the purpose of education? How do you know you have a good education? I typically do not really look at those numbers very carefully, and what I look at is the outcome of education of children. It's, the most recently, I think I'm worried about my own children. You know, just I have 2 children. I have a son who is in college. Actually, he's back home now on spring break, and he's going to graduate from the University of Chicago in about 2 months. So I'm asking, since he spends so much of my money, I'm trying to see if he has got a world-class education. And my definition is this, is when he graduates, if he doesn't come back to move into my basement, which actually I don't have one in Oregon, and that's a great education. I think many of you would agree that would be a good definition of being able to keep other people's children out of their basement would be the mission of all education. So I think if we start with that, and what can those test scores predict? Can those test scores guarantee any kind of outcomes? So that's the kind of a question I would like to raise with all of you. And we also know right now in the U.S. we have a big movement towards implementing the Common Core standards, and every day I see some new products, services trying to sell that as if the Common Core standards is going to guarantee my children to stay out of my basement, and that's what we call it, college and career readiness. I don't know how good a bet that is. In Australia, I know there's an Australian curriculum. In New Zealand, you're trying to work on your national curriculum, national standards, and so is England working on that as well. So everybody's trying to perfect this system and making good bet about the knowledge and skills that our children might need in trying to stay out of our basement. So here's some of the scores. I'm going to really read some interesting questions for you to think about. What defines a good education? This is from the most recent TIMSS data, the third and the trend in international mathematics and science study, and of 2011, which actually was released only a few months ago, I think end of 2012. If you look at some of the test scores, I picked 8th grade math as the example. If you look at Korea, Korea's number 1, 613, and Singapore got 611, and Chinese Taipei or Taiwan 609, Hong Kong 586, and Japan 570. So these are countries that have done great on this assessment. This is 8th grade math scores. And but if you look across them, I've noticed one thing that's in common. These are all Eastern Asian countries, and they're what I call them the chopstick using countries. If you use chopsticks, you score very well in mathematics. That's a good thing to think about. And below you have the spoon-using countries, the spoons and forks, the U.S., England, Australia. Was wondering actually if you switch the utensils you use, you might improve your math scores, but that's beyond the point. And then you look at next column, which is TIMSS normally asks questions about confidence. Means are you confident in your math? Do you think you usually do well in mathematics, or do you value math? And so some of the interesting questions you have. You look at Korea, it's the number 1. But only 3% of 8th graders are confident. In contrast, in Americans may be mathematically stupid in terms of measuring scores, but you got 24% of American students are confident, and the same as goes with England and Australia. So the spoon users for students are very much confident, and while they're not really good in taking the tests. So that's the interesting contrast. And this trend has existed for a long time, actually ever since there's major studies coming out there that countries score high, students have lower confidence. So does this mean basically that our students, when they are too confident, they don't score well? Or does maybe the high scores destroy the confidence? So what do you like? What would you like to have? If you can't have everything, what does this mean? Which, by the way, I should point out that within a country, actually the correlation is positive. That is, students with higher scores have higher level of confidence, and vice versa. This is not to say causality, but I think it does pose the interesting question about perhaps within an education system or within the educational culture, that is, when it raises test scores, it might at the same time decrease students' confidence in this, or vice versa. Again, we don't know. This is no causal relationship. But the interesting question, however, we should ask is that if you can have only one of the other as a mentioned system, not within a system, is that would you want more confident students, or would you want more higher test scores? What matters? I know in America, a lot of educational policymakers, to a certain degree, most of the Western countries have been talking about this, is that our students have lower math ability measured by test scores simply because they are too confident. So to improve our test scores, we need to make them less confident. And where did this confidence come from is basically they don't know how bad they are. So we need to make sure our students know how bad they are so they can learn and they would work harder to get their scores up. And to make sure they know how bad they are, we bring in globally benchmarked standards. We bring globally benchmarked assessments. So to make sure our students know that they are not only worse than their neighbor, they're worse than kids in thousands of miles away in Japan or Hong Kong or Korea. But actually Asian cultures have been worried about something else. They've been, after this data, for example, I picked some of the media response. And the Asian media responses have been very different than the media responses in the West. For example, this is up to the TIMSS results in 2012, and the data I just showed you. For example, in Japan, they are concerned about enthusiasm for studying science was below the global average. among Japanese second-year junior high students. And the fourth graders' interest in arithmetic was also below the world average. And Western media almost rarely mention about this kind of affective or emotional domain of student interest, confidence, and enthusiasm. In Singapore, they have the same problem. Talk about in Singapore, students has to work on the confidence in approaching the subjects of math and science. And in Hong Kong, for example, Hong Kong was scored quite high in math, but also even higher in PEARLS, the literacy assessment. Reading means basically almost, I think the top of the world in terms of reading scores, tied with Russia, but most of the students are not interested in reading. Actually, they're not motivated to read, and actually their motivation to read ranks the bottom, is the lower score. And so they're talking about what do you like to have, and this kind of model, I mean, this is going a long way back. This 2003, as you can see, shows the same kind of negative correlation between confidence and enjoyment and test scores. That is, globally speaking, countries with higher scores, in math, or actually in TIMSS in general, have lower confidence and lower enjoyment among their students. And then you have the PISA. PISA is another assessment which we've been talking a lot about, and Finland has traditionally scored very high in terms of their PISA scores in science, and actually until Shanghai came along in 2009, Finland was the top scorers in science, in math, and literacy in different domains, And but this is from a Finnish document, a government document, and I want you to read this. It says that, but when asked about their personal interest in different areas and aspects of science, Finnish students expressed less interest than their peers in most of the other OECD countries. And in fact, across the countries, the correlation between students' attitudes and attainment was negative. That again means higher scores and less positive attitudes towards science. And this basically means that students from relatively low-performing countries express the highest interest in science. And so the Finns were worried, and they said Finnish students' relative lack of interest in science can be seen as a serious warning for the future Finnish economy. And so this is something for you to ponder on the PISA. And again, on the PISA scores, and talk about the simplest and possibly most surprising finding is that many countries with the highest mean PISA science scores were at the bottom of the list of students interested in science. And Finland and Japan are prime examples. At the top on PISA science score, but at the very bottom on constructs like interest in science, future-oriented motivation, learning sciences, as well as on future science jobs. That is the inclination to see themselves as scientists in future studies and careers. And so this is all this negative correlation happening over there. And I then constructed another set of correlation analysis for my book, which I'll mention later on. Let's talk about how does PISA scores associate or correlate with entrepreneur activities, because we know in the 21st century we want to cultivate entrepreneurs. We want people who are not able, if they have to come back to stay in the basement, we want them to create jobs and not to find jobs, so they can stay out of their parents or other people's basement, or settlers, which depend on which country you're in. And so we have this red bar indicating countries in terms of rankings of math. And you can see Singapore is number 1 and towards Korea. By the way, these are only the developed countries. And so then the blue bar indicates their perceived entrepreneur capabilities of citizens in that country. And that means, do they believe they have the capacity to start business, to create jobs, to create enterprises? As you can see, they don't go together, and they are quite negative again. And then I did some more analysis. This is, by the way, data from PISA as well as Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. And you can see the PISA math, reading, and science are all significantly correlated negatively with entrepreneur capabilities, with entrepreneurship startup rate, with new business ownership rate, and total early stage entrepreneur activities. So all of this says that the measures we used to measure education outcomes, to view them as the best education systems in terms of test scores, do not result in the same kind of things we might value otherwise: entrepreneur capabilities, confidence, enjoyment. So what does all of this mean, basically? So I would like to, since this is very hard for me to gauge, to say whether even you're listening or you're taking a nap or you're sleeping, I'm going to stop there to ask you to type some in the chat somewhere, to type some questions so I can or responses. So what do you think? I would like to say some opinions here and or questions, and before I move on to talk more about today,
And I'm going to make a suggestion. It's hard to follow the chat when it's in a small box. To the top right of the chat box is a drop down, and you can detach the panel, or you can double click and pull the chat out and elongate it if it's been hard for you to watch the chat.
Anyone, actually, if you have a question, raise your hand, right? I think, Steve, you want to moderate some questions, because I just present a bunch of data out there, and which means that right now many people are already, at least governments, trying to perfect the education system following the international assessment scores as if they define what good education is. And I'm raising the other set of questions, and we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Yes, we've had a couple of questions come in. Catherine Davis says, I joined late and may have missed it, but how do you measure perceived entrepreneurship?
That data comes from a global entrepreneurship monitor. If you search online, you can find it. It's from the Babson College, who is traces some 50-some countries, and they do surveys over there. And one of the questions asked is about perceived entrepreneur capabilities. I mean, do you believe, for example, you have the capacity to start a business?
Sharon wants to know who gets educated in the chopstick countries.
Well, Steve, I think all the chopstick countries actually, at least for 9 years at least, it's a compulsory education. That is everybody. And the selection, the sorting mechanism may begin after 9th grade. I mean, they were sorted in many ways into different types of schools, but the education is actually indeed everybody.
Rob wants to know, is low math achievement causally related to entrepreneurship capacity? Can't we be successful on both?
No, they are not causal at all. I think all of this, what I've been able to come out with is I couldn't, I think it's going to be very hard to justify a causal relationship at all. What I'm presenting here is really about the negative correlation. You can explain the relationship in different ways. One is that we can call it they change together. That means both. It means that high scores does not necessarily have to cause low confidence, or low confidence causes the other, and they can be responding to, let's say, one type of education. For example, if one type of education that may improve your test scores, but at the same time can decrease your confidence, and so they are not necessarily causal together. For example, I think I have some explanations which I'll present later. That's today I want to talk about different paradigms, so I'll explain that a little bit.
Okay, we've got a lot of questions flowing in. How does the individual teacher in the classroom use this information to battle against the standardized test agenda being laid on them?
Well, I think that's a great question. A great question, I think, is as a teacher, a lot of times teachers and education leaders, we have been asked to improve our schools, to make our schools more effective, our teaching more effective. But what I'm today hope to raise the question about make us effective in doing what? We've been learning a lot about how, but without thinking about the why and to what outcome we're trying to measure. And I want to also bring the idea of a caution that there may be costs. Once one type of teaching or one type of education, well, it may raise your indicators, or improve your education measured in one way, but could cause side effects in other aspects. Like, I mean, if you are a teacher, you know this very well, and I'm very aware of this. Some reading programs, for example, they could improve your children's reading test scores, but they could cause them to hate reading forever, those things. So that's why I'm actually suggesting every teacher requiring every product, every policy in education to come with a warning label. Like when you buy medicine, when you buy Tylenol, you should, it causes drowsiness. If you take that, I think we should warn people. Say, this common core, for example, should come down. Yes, we can all teach to the common core, but it could mean that we're narrowing the curriculum and that we don't get to teach, music and art. We could be, while we're trying to close the achievement gap, we might be widening the education gap for more people. So I think as teachers, this data at least helps us to raise awareness to say, okay, when we try to go after something, we might lose something else.
I have about 10 more questions. How many more do you want?
Well, take another 3, and then I'll move on.
So is there a connection between education and entrepreneurship, or is entrepreneurship more the result of social and economic policy?
Well, I think the entrepreneurship activities, are related a lot more to economic policy, to the social context. However, I think the capability has a lot to do with how we're educated.
There were a couple of questions about the correlation between, it says Australia and Belgium seem to have the best correlation. Is that correct?
Looks like so, yes. This is just one year of data. If you want to say more of the data and the more in-depth analysis, I'll be happy to refer you to my book or several articles I wrote on my blog. Take one more question, then I'll move on.
Okay, this is one more from Edward. Would you hypothesize that rigid educational structures limit agile thinking and adaptability?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what I'm going to then. That's a great segue to the next slide, the next segment of my presentation today. So what I've done is hypothesized different paradigms. So this is what I call our traditional and current educational paradigm. We start by defining what skills and knowledge our children will need when they graduate, so they can become either employable or they can become, we call contributing citizens. So all educational systems right now, or schools for that matter, often begin by defining the outcomes. So there's government leaders and school principals and people love this thing. Parents even like to have this thing. We want to know after 12 years or 20 years what my children are able to do and know already. So we start with that, and then we are making good bet. We assume the knowledge and skills we prescribed or defined are of value. It's like making a good bet. It's basically, if you did this, I will promise you a better life. So this is what the Common Core is doing in the U.S. and other national curriculum. We're promising that if you master what I give you, you'll be great. And then schools are given the task of transmitting effective of that. Then we parse it into grade level expectations, and we parse that into gateways at the different case stages. You must master this. And then we make the assumption that all students, regardless of their individual differences, the backgrounds, can and should achieve this. And if they didn't, it's either because they didn't work hard enough, or the parents didn't care, or the teachers are not good enough to do this. So that's what we're trying to do this. And in this process, we basically, since we don't care about who you are, the backgrounds, and then we we turn you into employable people or contributing citizens. If you look at this paradigm, it's very much like what I call like a sausage making. You may make a great piece of steak, but I don't like steak. I think sausage will sell better, so I'm going to turn into a sausage. You may by yourself be broccoli, which tastes good by itself, but no, we don't like it. We want to turn into sausage. So we try to narrow everybody and turn into the same kind of sausages. But of course, we have different kind of sausages. You have the Harvard, the Stanford type of sausage. Then you have the community college sausage. Then you have the dropout, high school dropout sausage. This is what we try to do in the traditional paradigm. And then American schools do this, Australian schools do this. And when the result, of course, if we come to an agreement with commonly definable outcomes, we can measure that. I think the PISA, TIMSS, all of the international assessment measures this outcome. We automatically assume PISA measures, for example, the ability to survive in 21st century of 15-year-olds. And then, however, while all schools strive to do this, while all educational systems strive to become good sausage makers, and there are differences. Some countries do a better job at making sausage than other systems. So the question just now mentioned about a rigid system. So if you look at the Asian, the chopstick countries, I'm going to use that as an example, they have more clearly defined standards, at least until No Child Left Behind comes on. It's a very dictatorial, authoritarian system, and they have a narrow curriculum, and the teachers were trained to do that, and there's assessment along the way all the time to remind people how far away you are from the goals. And then there's also ranking systems to make sure that you know your position, so that you know how much worse or better you are than other people. And then there's also reward and sorting mechanism, which we admire in the U.S. Western countries called meritocracy. That is, those who score better are rewarded with a better position in a different school, better schools. Sometimes they're even rewarded with better seating in the classroom. And those who don't do well are punished all the time. So everybody is reminded every day that they have to master the skills. But in the process, what you have, in essence, is that you will have people who, as I said, who may become who may be a broccoli, but now is your trend, treat him as a sausage. Then he would make a horrible sausage. Those kids will be either kicked out of the system, and then or put down into a different school, and they will lose confidence. But more importantly, if they're out of the system somehow, then you drive the average scores up, because those bad ones are not in the system anymore, or in other places. So that's one of the things. And then when you lose the confidence, and you will know you can never be better, because it's a ranking system. Ranking system, only one person is the best, and the rest are all worse than the first one. So that's when you always feel like you are inadequate in doing anything. And all your other talents, you may be talented in, let's say, music, in art, or something, but since you don't do well in this domain, those other things don't really matter. They don't matter. We don't value them. We only value what's been prescribed and what's been assessed. So in this way, you basically produce less confident people, and you produce more homogeneous talents, and that will drive up your scores. But you may not have something much of anything else. So this is the traditional paradigm. The traditional paradigm was honestly was very useful and powerful in an economy when you require homogeneous talents, people who know similar things, people have similar skills. Imagine you work in agriculture society, like my little village in China. In my village, and not much, nothing else actually really matters than your ability to farm, to drive the water buffalo, to plow the field, to carry sweet potatoes. So those are the skills. But even if you were a Beyonce, even if you were a Justin Bieber, you wouldn't be of much use in the village, because those talents were not valid. We couldn't support that. And then also that the same thing happens in the industrial age. If you all work on assembly line, we were requiring people, more obedient, compliant, homogeneous, mediocre people who will learn only to be good enough, the skills and knowledge, and you can prescribe that. All of those things actually worked very well. And for most of human history, creativity is actually not a good thing. It causes trouble. For most authoritarian, dictatorial leaders, it causes trouble all the time. So for a long time, we never really need to value confidence. We can care less about your creativity as long as we have a few people who normally either survived schools or succeeded despite of schooling, like Thomas Edison, like Henry Ford, all those guys. A few of them could create new industries that employed a lot of people who are drones. So the old model actually worked very well, and they worked best. They were perfected in Asian countries, Eastern Asian countries, particularly like China. This model is no different from the emperor's exam, the Keju exam that started about 600, somewhere about 1,300 years ago, or about you can trace back almost 2,000 years. The emperor says, okay, I want people who can pass my test, and my test is going to be about Confucian classics. And the Confucian classics may have nothing to do for you. I mean, practical value necessarily. But if you take the test, you pass my exam, you're rewarded with a government position, with a comfortable life, a comfortable life forever. And so people would go after that. So they learn to be compliant, to be homogeneous. Those who can do are either out of the system, or they're basically will remain unrewarded all the time. So the whole Asian system have this culture of people developing the strategies to cope with the dictatorial demand that wants everybody to become a sausage. So they're very good. I mean, they are the best sausage making machine. But American education, in many ways, American Western style education, we are not a good sausage maker, and we have not been. And in the U.S., for example, we have I think Larry Katz and Lillian and Golden out of Harvard, who wrote a book called The Race Between Technology and Education. They identified some 6 virtues of American education that include public funding, public provision, and separation of church and state, and gender neutral. But the 2 most important virtues they identified, I think, actually explains why America is a sausage-making machine, an imperfect sausage-making machine, but that makes some bacon. That's what I would say, the creative entrepreneur people. If you look at the 2 other virtues, one is called a decentralized a system with a lot of local control. So America as a nation, we have tens of thousands of local school districts until very recently, right until probably Daddy Bush came along, and we had many districts had a lot more control of their curriculum, of what they want to offer, what they think they want to teach, despite the fact that many schools may be offering the same thing, but they did not have a national mandate. So that means schools could have their unique local features. That means that the students in the U.S. cannot, as a group, homogeneously do very well on testing because they have different expectations. They teach differently, and teachers have more control within their classroom. And that's the negative side is they cannot make the same sausage, and they just have different tools. But at the same time, they could enable different people to thrive in different ways. Some schools taking pride in be great at sports, some good at music, some good at art, and typically schools offered a broader curriculum. So allow students to at least find one place that could be good. They don't have to be good in the same way. I just look at American schools, school talent shows. Some people, if you use the Common Core standards, you would barely name them talent shows. You would name them, I don't know, whatever that thing is. But we consider everything to be talent. Everything, from taekwondo to music to art, and actually we don't consider math calculation as talent on those talent shows. But maybe if the Common Core is become so prevalent, so successfully implemented, all school talent shows will become kids throwing math scores at each other. That could be fun. But anyway, so that's one thing, is that we have the locally controlled, teacher-defined, so allowing individuals to possibly find somewhere that they could be great. And again, this is until No Child Left Behind. The other thing has to do with that if you have a paradigm, a good sausage-making machine, is that it measures how successful you are in terms of getting close to the expectation. And that also means that you have to demonstrate your ability by answering questions, not by asking questions, So your ability to find answers prescribed in the standards become much more important than your ability to ask questions, So that's why so in the tests, no matter what kind of test, honestly, as that standardized testing, most of the time has more to do with you finding answers. It's not about asking questions. We seldom ask students to measure students' ability to ask questions. We don't do that. We will measure them how you find answers. Whatever in the open-ended it is, we're still demanding students to comply, to come close to what we expect of them. It's not about originality. Nobody in standardized testing talk about what if we come up with an iPhone. We don't ask those questions. So the second virtue that I think is valuable is say American education is a second chance system, is an open and forgiving system. That is, we allow second chances. We allow for a lot of opportunities to forgive the youthful transgressions of our students. If you fail elementary school, if you don't do well in elementary, we still give you a chance to go to equal opportunity to get to secondary school. If you fail high school, we even have a GED waiting for you. Those opportunities, allowing people to explore what they're not good at, that's pretty cool. That's very important. Allowing people to identify their passion, because in a system, that is, if we can force, like Asian system demonstrate, everybody to be good test takers, because it's just memorization. We believe if you spend enough time, you can memorize it, you can pass the test. We can force you to become mediocre, but to become greatly entrepreneurial and creative, you have to be passion driven. You can force me to learn how to paint, but you cannot force me to become a Picasso, even no matter how hard I try. So that's what I think is the kind of things. Right now, all the education reforms trying to right now, with the Common Core, not other national assessment programs, all of those things, we're trying to, in essence, to perfect this old paradigm. We're trying to become a perfect sausage maker as others. And this, again, is not wrong. If America was trying this 100 years ago, I might even endorse it. I say, well, that's great. Let's do it. And, however, we have entered a new economy. The new economy is the economy that as all of you are aware, and many people have written about it, machines, automation have taken many jobs away. The traditional jobs that require similar skills, mediocre jobs, are gone, either taken over by machines or outsourced to other places. So America needs the new middle class. And today, the new innovations, for example, like Facebook, does not need factory workers. New creativity people come up with new ideas that employ very few people. And so what I would argue that we are in a new economy, we need a new middle class. The new middle class, the manufacturing workers, the traditional middle class are gone. The new middle class will have to become the creative class, and or Daniel Pink called the right-brainers, the talents that traditionally overlooked, undervalued, become important. So my kind of conclusion is that creativity used to be something nice to have, as long as it don't cause too much trouble. Today, creativity becomes a necessity, an economical necessity. Everybody, if you want to become middle class, you have to become creative and entrepreneurial. And there are no jobs to be found until you create some. And also in the age of globalization, the developed countries, like in the U.S., we spend a lot more money than many, many other countries. We shouldn't try to compete for jobs with the Chinese or Indians or Africans, because we already spend over $100,000 by the time we graduate from college. And the Chinese may have spent only $10,000. $100,000 should buy talents who will create opportunities for other people, not trying to take away what other people may desire. So we have the moral obligation to become creative, entrepreneur, and as well. So what this means is that I would think we are at a juncture that we will need everyone to be creative. But how do you become creative? This is the model, a different paradigm, I would say. So we have a different paradigm of education. I would call this is the entrepreneur-oriented education. The old one is I call employee-oriented education. We were preparing employees to follow orders, to follow directions, to become similar with others, to become homogenized. And the new one, I would say that it's a new model. The new model is that we want our education to start with the child, not start with the prescribed content. We do not assess if a child has met someone else's expectation or how well has he traveled other people's prescribed path. Instead, we start with individual differences. We start with their cultural strength. We start from that. That is the construction. So in this new model, education is to enhance everyone's talent. If you can make everyone uniquely great, and they will stay out of our basement. And that's the challenge. This is the paradigm shift is very hard to move. And because we like to be able to measure a group of people, we like to see how well everybody travels along the race course instead of trying to look at the individuals. So in this new model, I would say education is about enhancing strength of individuals, not forcing upon the same set of expectations on everyone. This is not a fixed deficit. It's not to say, okay, you are so far away from this expectation, therefore I need to fix you. No, you need to focus on individual talents. And how do we actually do this then? And I have some models I would call this the triad model. In the first level is about the schools deal with what. We don't debate about how good the curriculum is. We try to personalize education that enhance individual talents. We allow students voice and choice in the governance, in constructing a new environment. And then we move on to engage students in making things, in creating things. Today with technology, and technology is a great creation tool, but it's been misused very often in schools as a tool for consumption, for example. I think to this, like all this video, writing, all those things, they're really great technology to enable children to make and create authentic products for other people, and as well as globally connected. To this, education should happen in schools as a global campus, not in a confined, a classroom or on the one school. To their students, again, with technology and globalization, we should learn to how identify others, people in other countries, other schools as resources. If you are teaching some courses, you want to teach some course and something that you don't have access locally, and bring expertise from other countries. Or you can learn to become partners, to learn how to find collaborators from other places. And all try to find the need. If you want to become entrepreneurial, you can become, you need to learn about opportunities, identify other people, other children, or other countries, like in Africa, what they need, and then use your knowledge or learn to create products and services that might help them. So I call this the three elements of the new entrepreneurship-oriented education. The what is got a lot more student autonomy, personalized education, the how it's become product-oriented learning, which is a version of project-based learning, but emphasis on authenticity of the product, emphasis on the magnitude, how significant the product is, emphasis on disciplined creativity, and sustained a process of revision and to become great. So that's the three models and the three elements of this. And if you're interested, you can read more from, again, in the book and other places. So I want to end with two examples of what I'm trying to do. At the University of Oregon, I'm launching a project called OBA. And it doesn't really mean much, OBA basically the three letters of the word global, so we call it the heart of global. Also, it's a nice word that's pronounceable in every language without messing it up. So the system, there's obaworld.net, is K-12 site, and this is a closed site to make sure we protect our children, comply with the FERPA and COPA, and we're charging $1 per student per year. So what it is, it's a cloud-based learning platform, very much like Moodle, but I added more portfolio assessment, portfolio construction, and social networking, and also synchronous video conferencing. But those are not interesting, and those technology platforms are everywhere. But what's interesting is I'm trying to get schools to sign on from different countries. So what it enables is that students can create pages, create courses, teachers can create courses, schools can create courses for their own students, but also at the same time they can market those courses to other schools within the system in other countries. So if you are a school in China, your students could be creating a Mandarin course and then offer it to students in Africa. Or if you're in the US, your students could be running a math tutoring lesson for students in South America. Also, if your students could be creating English textbooks for personalized English textbooks for students in Japan and vice versa. So the whole idea is to enable students in making things that have authentic audience. Also enable schools to expand the course offerings to other countries and also bring courses from other places. So this is trying to encourage the creative and entrepreneurial activities that capitalizes on local unique strength of students, teachers, and schools. If you want to play with this, you can get on. This is closed. There is a version that is not closed. Anyone can play. It's free. It's called obaverse.net. You can play with this thing, and this is free, okay, and Oba Word is not free. It's $1 per student per year, okay. That's what we're charging. I'm trying to make it so cheap that no one can say it's too expensive, okay. The other one, a program I'm trying to run, is more faculty development. This is a master's program I call Global Educational Leadership, and I'm trying to implement what I preach. So this one is I want to. Participants in this system, in this program, will be from different countries. School leaders, teachers, or aspiring leaders will become the students in the master's program. And every student is going to create a major product or service that they will find meaningful, useful, therefore it's authentic. And also I want to use this platform, I can use an OBA to do this, to enable school leaders to build a global partnership and colleagues with friends from different countries. So if you enroll in the program, you automatically have friends from different places. It's mostly online. We have a 2 to 3 week study abroad, which students would choose one destination, would spend 2 to 3 weeks together to examine an educational system. So the idea is to cultivate entrepreneur school leaders who would view their schools as global enterprises, who would identify partners, identify consumers from other countries, but also at the same time to automatically view our schools as an entity that's global, that's globally connected for our students and our faculty. So this is, you can find that on my website, a brief description, and it's through University of Oregon. And by the way, to brag a little bit, I really don't like rankings, but we are top ranking the college education, and we're offering huge discount as the first cohort. I'm managing this right now, and you can apply. We're going to decide what to do by June 1 in the applications. So then, let me see, the slides I use are selected from a stack of slides I've uploaded on my website. You can find many slides. I use this lot more economical data on my list. Or if you're interested in, you can get a copy of my book, which describes a lot more about the paradigm and explains the relationship between PISA and entrepreneurship and the value and necessity of creativity and the entrepreneur spirit, as well as examples of schools and programs have implemented a part of what I proposed as a new paradigm. So this is the book, and get on Amazon, other places. And again, my website, Twitter, and Facebook, and email if you would like to stay in touch with me. I think I want to leave some time for more questions and response. Thank you.
So if you have a question for Yong, you can raise your virtual hand. It's the third icon over in the participant window. Looks like a hand. If you hover over, you'll see raise hand. Okay, it looks like Roland's going to ask the first question. Oh, maybe not. You can also put a question in the chat. There were so many questions that flew by that I'm sorry, I can't get track of them well. But I do have some previous ones from earlier when I was keeping track, and I'll move to those if we don't get an active question here.
We don't have questions? Oh, we have one. Tia is raising.
I'm not seeing a raised hand, but Tia, if you do have a question, I'm glad to give you the microphone. Just click on the talk button at the top left of your screen.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so Nguyen, I've given you microphone privileges. Just click on talk at the top left of your screen.
Okay, thank you. You asked a question regarding the soft skills that we're talking about with, and also known as the 21st century skills, collaboration, creativity, and so forth. How would those be applied in terms of entrepreneurship? I guess my question is, how would they be measured if they were to be parts of the entrepreneur concept that you're creating? I hope you can hear my question okay.
I think I heard part of it. Steve, did you hear most of it? Could you rephrase?
I think the question was about soft skills and how they would be measured.
Oh, soft skills. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm really I talk a lot in the book. I write about there is a slide I did not put up there. The really entrepreneurship skills is in essence a set of soft skills. It's a spirit. So there are definitely hard skills like people talk about, computation, financial management. But most importantly, I'm talking about confidence. I'm talking about social capital or social skills. Talk about risk-taking spirit. Talk about a lot of different things, and also talk about your unique proposition of your abilities. So entrepreneurship or creativity is more of a human element that is very easily overlooked and seldom, actually never measured in our schools. We focus too much on the cognitive abilities and knowledge, but not on the emotional, on the affective domain, and those may become actually a lot more important. Another thing I want to add to this is that I want to emphasize uniqueness. Because right now we have different kind of proposals from different countries. This will teach everybody everything. The U.S., for example, 21st century skill partnership skills. If you look at their prescription from core curriculum to foundation to all kind of knowledge, it's almost impossible. I think in the 21st century we need to think about hyper specialization. The different economy. Identify what you're good at and what you're not good at, and be great in what you're good at, not necessarily be trying to compensate what you're not good at.
Donna Joy wants to know about whether poverty is taken into consideration for any of this data.
Well, no, not in this regard. I think poverty is not, and that's actually a great question to think about. I have some side comments in regard to that. Is today I think by trying to think people in poor places need the most basics first, that's actually depriving them of the opportunity to become more creative and entrepreneurial because we are depriving them of the vast possibilities of trying to do something better than just giving them the so-called basics. Even using U.S. as an example, No Child Left Behind, as we just wrote a chapter of a book about education opportunities. By forcing children to meet the demands in literacy and reading, many schools had to narrow their curriculum and therefore eliminate opportunities such as math and such as music and art and sports and recess. And actually, opportunities like music, arts, and sports, they are much harder to come by for poor people. And so maybe public schools may be the only place offering those things. Now we've got rid of them, and the poor families actually are further disadvantaged. And the same thing applies to foreign languages, field trips, all those things. OBA, as someone is asking, OBA is now founded by the University of Oregon. We try to make it a membership organization. We're a very, very small team. Actually, it's me and 3 computer programmers, and we have 1 person assistant. We are trying to make it a social movement. We would love to, if you have any students who is interested in leading and helping with us, we would love it. We want to get people involved in this whole thing. So we are looking for entrepreneurial, creative people.
We're getting down to what have to be the last questions. Lash Points wants to know, why do you emphasize preparation for the economy as the major purpose of education?
I emphasize that only because that's now the major driving of any education reform discourse, because government and business people always talk about economics. I don't really quite believe in that. Like in my book, I talk a lot about social entrepreneurs, policy entrepreneurs, and creative people. Economy, I actually don't believe it should be the major driver of education, but it's been the driver for educational discourse. So I'm using this more as to counter directly some of the dominant educational policy conversations. So I have to emphasize this.
Okay, maybe time for one more question. If you've got a question, you can put it in the chat. I will apologize if I've missed the question. It was already there. Please feel free to post it again. Or you can raise your virtual hand. It's the third icon over in the participant window. Yeah, I'm going to echo what Donna Joy is saying. This has been a great session. Brenda says this information is extremely valuable. I feel that way every time I hear you speak, Yong. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Steve, for putting this together. I enjoy talking to everyone, even though I would feel like I was just talking to you. And maybe some of you will see each other so that at DLC and other places. And thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Yong. Perfect to have you here. We have sessions that start at the top of the hour. Please feel free to go to schoolleadershipsummit.com, check out the schedule for the next hour. Thanks to Yong. Thanks to all of you. Bye now.
Bye.